Young mistress, Yao said slowly, I am a little cold. Her cheeks and ears were indeed red. NN quickly brought a blanket and some hot ginger tea. She allowed Maomao to have what was left of the tea, but she was not as generous with the honey as she had been with Yao. Maomao breathed on her cup, then she took a sip. The warmth spread through her. The drink had a lovely aroma. NN must have grated tangerine zest into it. The medical office was kept warm for injured or sick people who arrived. However, that had the unfortunate side effect of making the occupants somewhat drowsy. Maomao had seen soldiers escape training on cold winter days by going to the medical office. Their commanding officers would often drag them back out. Today, the highest-ranking physicians were away at a garden party. This left a younger doctor in charge, and he was comparatively easy on Maomao and the others. Everyone felt that with the cats away, the mice should take a little time to play. Ah, that warmed me up. Let's get back to work then, Yao said. NN replied, young mistress, you should stay here today. Let me and Maomao handle the outdoor work. Hey, I want to be inside too, Maomao thought. I couldn't do that, Yao said. Then she studied NN for a second. I know that look. My uncle has been here, hasn't he? So Maomao had guessed correctly. Young mistress, how was it? Did he cause too much trouble? No, mistress. He looked like he was ready to wait for you, though. NN glanced back at the young doctor sitting at the desk. He stood and walked over to them with a stern look. He said, I made sure to explain to him that this is a place for the sick and the injured, not just a waiting area. I also pointed out that if he stayed, he would never make it to the garden party in time. That got him to leave, I see. Thank you very much, Yao said with a grateful dip of her head. NN gritted her teeth and gave the doctor a jealous look. She did not have to worry. He was not trying to impress Yao. He was hoping to get to NN. However, NN, who lived her life for her young mistress, seemed intent on treating every man around the young lady as if he were a caterpillar. Maomao transferred the laundered bandages to a stew pot and got ready to boil them. She would have liked to hang around a little while longer, but finishing the task at hand came first. Maomao, NN said, and Maomao looked over at her. I found you some kindling. She passed Maomao a hinged board with cloth stretched over it. When opened, it revealed a man's portrait. He never gives up, does he? Yao groaned, even as she went to the brazier to get a coal to start the oven. It was clear now why Yao's uncle had stopped by. The portrait was obviously of a potential suitor, but it was impossible to tell how much it had been dressed up. The guy looked like he could have been an actor. The young doctor kept shooting looks at Maomao and Yao, as if begging them to hurry up and leave. He thought being alone with NN might give him a chance to get to know her better. Maomao doubted it, though. The other young doctors had already given up on her, and on Yao as well. She watched Yao like a hawk, and they had given up on him long ago. This man was too dense to understand. One could add that Maomao seemed not to have been part of their calculations from the beginning. She wondered if he was actually able to talk to her at all when they were alone. Maomao thought about it. It was a simple question, but this doctor proved resolute. Even as she and Yao were leaving the office, Maomao could hear him saying, shall we continue our conversation, NN? Maybe you could bring it up with Yao later too. There was no response, but if the guy could get Yao involved somehow, NN would put up with at least a little of his chit-chat. I am sure she does not see him as anything but a conversation generator at best, though. As she walked toward the oven outside, Maomao thought again about how formidable NN could be. By afternoon, the bandages had been boiled and dried. Maomao walked along, rubbing her hands together and looking forward to lunch when she returned to the medical office. The garden party must have paused because she saw a crowd gathering at the toilets again. You do not need to use the bathroom, Yao, she asked. No, I am fine. What about you, Maomao? Yao looked betrayed. Maomao noticed the toilets looked like they would soon be busy. She had wisely relieved herself while Yao was drying off. Are you sure you don't want to go, Yao? She asked again. Yes, I am sure. The bathrooms were separated into men's and women's facilities. However, with so many members of the opposite sex nearby, using them probably still required some courage. You could even see a few men who just could not hold it any longer, ducking into the women's restroom. The court ladies who were trying to use it looked positively disturbed. You have been to one of the garden parties, haven't you, Maomao? Did NN tell you that? Yes. Maomao reflected afresh on NN's prowess at learning things. What is it like? Yao asked. Cold. It is not the stuff dreams are made of, if that is what you are thinking. The party had looked pleasant enough, but for Maomao, who had been there purely as a serving woman, it had been a battle with the cold. This was especially true with Princess Lingli there. She had still been an infant at the time and could not be allowed to catch a chill. Perhaps getting a hair stick was a little bit dreamy, but Maomao was certain NN was watching them closely from somewhere they couldn't see. And then there was the food. Everyone had to check it for poison, which meant no one really knew what the meal was supposed to taste like. They sat sipping soup that had long since gone cold. Maomao thought there was hardly any chance to put poison in anything. Poisoning food was in fact a risky business. If you were going to do it, you had better be ready for the consequences. Some people were willing to pay the price, which is why Maomao herself had once tasted tainted soup. Ugh, I wish I could have some more of that. Maomao, is that a smile? Yao asked, studying her closely. Oh, pardon me. She had found herself lost in the memory of that soup. You might assume a poison would be bitter or nauseating, but in fact many perfectly palatable things were poisonous. Blowfish is one example, and certain mushrooms are another. As they passed the toilets, they heard a distinct sound of someone vomiting. They looked over and saw some men gathered around a well, rinsing their mouths out with water. Their builds suggested they were soldiers, but their uniforms were a little finer than usual. Even military men dressed up for a garden party. Maomao thought she recognized one of them. Do you think something is the matter? Yao asked. If you are curious, we could ask them. Huh. No, Yao said, but Maomao was already heading for the well. She was approaching one of the beefy men who looked like a big dog. Haven't seen you for a while, sir, she said. Oh, hello, miss, said Lihaku, looking perfectly friendly. He had been at the garden party 2 years before as well. It wasn't a surprise to see him here now. Is something wrong? I thought I heard vomiting. Ah, thanks for asking, it is no big deal. The food was just not quite good. Huh, guys, Lihaku said, turning to his companions. Not quite good. That stuff was awful, one of them said. And they serve that in the palace. The old cook at the mess hall cooks better. That soup, I knew it would be cold, but this was something else. There was too much of something in there, whatever it was. Do you think His Majesty's was as bad as ours? No, he got something different. The Emperor would not eat the same stuff as us. Yeah, I guess not. The soldiers started laughing. Maomao said, was the food bad? She knew the kinds of things they served at these parties. The food might become cold, but it should have been top quality, unless they served something truly different to the official guests. May I ask what was served? You said this was the soup. If the chef served a dubious meal to the emperor or the high officials, he might soon lose his job or even his head. But if the foul flavor was due to something that got in without his knowing it, that would be another kind of problem. Lihaku said, it was just so salty. Perhaps they were aiming for southern-style cuisine, you know, something a little different. They served these eggs with a pattern. It certainly looked good. After taking a bite, the men discovered the eggs were very salty, and the soup was almost nauseating. You said the eggs were patterned? Maomao asked. Do you like tea eggs? Making a tea egg involves cracking the shell of a boiled egg and steeping it in tea. This results in a spiderweb pattern on the surface. After that, you can simply eat it. Perhaps they were served at the garden party because they looked rather fancy. We managed to force them down, but we were worried the rest of the meal would taste terrible as well. Yes, but nobody else seemed bothered. Our commander was even smacking his lips, saying, my, that was good. Maybe his tongue had stopped working. The soldiers continued eating, afraid that they were the ones whose sense of taste had gone haywire. When they each arrived and discovered other people thought the meal tasted funny, they realized something really was wrong. How long has it been since you all ate the soup? Maomao asked. Maybe an hour, Lihaku said. I had to fight the urge to throw up the whole time. I rushed here as soon as recess was announced. He and everyone else there had obviously been sweating. An hour? You look like you are in decent health. What does that mean? Are you seriously thinking it might have been poisoned? Hey, look at us. We are fit as fiddles. It depends on the poison. Certain kinds take longer to start working than others, Yao interjected. There was a touch of real emotion in her voice, the sound of someone who knew what she was talking about from first-hand experience. Geez, do not say that. You are awfully frightening for such a pretty lady, you know that, Lihaku said, frowning. If you have any further symptoms, come to the medical office, Maomao said. I will give you some medicine that will make you vomit your insides out. But I need my insides to stay inside me. Maomao and Yao headed back to the office, leaving the pale-faced Lihaku behind them. What do you think is going on, Maomao? Yao asked. My first thought would be that the salt clumped together. It usually dissolves in soup, but it seems those men back there received a bit too much in their bowls. Perhaps the chef used especially large chunks of salt, or maybe some salt was added late during the cooking process. Whatever the case, she would simply have to wait and see if they showed up at the medical office feeling worse. Yao did not look completely convinced, but for the moment she decided to go with Maomao's hypothesis. Everyone else was busy with the garden party, but for Maomao and Yao, this was a chance to go home early, and they were going to enjoy it. Today they only had to clean the medical office before finishing for the day. Ah, this was a nice and easy day, the young doctor said to NN. I only hope tomorrow will be so relaxed. If she had some time after this, perhaps they might go to dinner. You haven't written up the daily report, she replied, placing some paper firmly in front of the doctor. Dr. Liu will be back any minute, so you had better get writing. Then she took out an overgarment and put it on Yao. It is cold out, young mistress. You must make sure you stay warm. Yeah, I know, said Yao. She also had a scarf piled around her neck. Maomao pulled on a cotton jacket and planted herself in front of the young doctor. His name was Li, but there were two other Lis in the office. Calling him simply Li wasn't very efficient. His personal name was Tianyu, though Maomao and her companions had never used it. He said, please feel free to call me Tianyu. Don't be shy, he had said at their first meeting. That was precisely why none of the young ladies ever had been. Maomao, Yao and NN might each have had their own motivations for this obstinacy, but the end result was the same. See you tomorrow, Maomao said to Tianyu. See you tomorrow, Yao echoed. What would you like for dinner, young mistress? Said NN, completely ignoring him. He must have talked to her for a long time today. Tianyu was waving as they left, but NN did not even glance at him. Meanwhile, Maomao was thinking to Yao. She said, say pork. Pork. A good, fatty food would be perfect on a cold day like this. As soon as they left the office, a cold wind began to nip at their ears. Yao said, let's see. I think chicken sounds nice. Something crunchy on the outside. Maomao's telepathy had failed to reach her, but chicken was a good consolation prize. All right. Then we will need something clean and sharp to go with it, Maomao said, inserting herself into the conversation. Good point. I would not mind some raw fish and vegetables, Yao said. NN looked at Maomao. With her lips she said, okay then, Maomao. We don't have enough vegetables. Do you think you could buy some? But her eyes communicated a clear message: those who don't work don't eat. That was that then. Maomao shrugged and nodded, though inside she was trembling with fear. Chapter 13, The Hair Stick Thief. The chicken did indeed turn out crispy on the outside, tender and juicy on the inside. The memory of it was enough to make Maomao salivate. That was a delicious dinner, she thought, letting her mind wander over the previous day's meal as she did her work. She powdered some herbs in a mortar and swallowed her drool. Maomao thought of herself as a halfway decent cook, but she had to admit she couldn't hold a candle to NN in the kitchen. NN had once mentioned her older brother was a professional chef. However, NN was also quite skilled at preparing food. The chicken's skin had been grilled perfectly, concealing light pink meat underneath. When Maomao bit into it, warm juices burst into her mouth. The food had been seasoned with salt and a crunchy black powder. It turned out to be pepper. NN did not hold back when it came to feeding Yao. Maomao thought most of her wages went to food, and with Maomao joining them for so many meals recently, it certainly wasn't getting any cheaper. Maomao paused. When she thought about it like that, she realized she should probably contribute some money for food. This was definitely better than eating at a bad diner somewhere. Perhaps she could at least cover the cost of the ingredients. All right, she said, nodding to herself. Yao appeared beside her. What are you nodding about? Dr. Liu has been calling for you. Oh, I see, she said, cleaning up the mortar and herbs. I can do that, just get going. What did you do anyway? Nothing yet, nothing at all so far. Yao's expression suggested that the question was her equivalent of a joke, if a somewhat pointed one. Maomao was a more experienced apothecary than Yao or NN. Because of this, she was often given assignments the other two were not. For example, she was frequently sent out to collect ingredients. The difference in their tasks bothered Yao, which explained her sometimes sharp humor. She has really softened since we first met, Maomao thought. Had Yao changed, or did Maomao simply see her differently now? She went to the room where the doctor was waiting. You needed me, Dr. Liu. Here. He handed her a letter sealed in wax with a familiar seal. Empress Jyokayu. There were probably other ways to get a letter to her, at least under normal circumstances. The fact that Dr. Liu held the message meant it was urgent. He said, you are wanted at her palace immediately. The letter contained the same message, though it offered no details. Very well, she said. I will find Liumen and no, just you. She did not understand. A eunuch, much like her father, should have been perfectly qualified to examine the Empress. Why was she chosen alone? I can see you have questions, but you know who sent this letter and you know what she wants. There is nothing I can add. Don't waste time, get going. Dr. Liu seemed to have some concerns of his own, but this was the Empress they were dealing with. Even a chief physician couldn't argue with her. Yes, sir, Maomao said, and then she went as instructed. She was taken from the medical office to Jyokayu's palace by carriage. She was not leaving the palace grounds, but it would have been unseemly for her to simply walk between the outer and inner courts. She passed through a series of gates and finally arrived at the Empress's pavilion. Jyokayu's residence in the rear palace had been perfectly sumptuous, but it was dwarfed by her current dwelling. The Empress's home must have been at least 3 times the size of the precious consort's home. Maomao got out of the carriage and stood at the door. A slim, pretty woman opened the door for her. It was Haku Yu, Maomao thought. They had served together at the Jade Pavilion, though only briefly. She was one of 3 ladies in waiting who had come from Jyokayu's hometown. These were 3 sisters, each separated by a year. They resembled each other quite closely. To help people distinguish them, they wore accessories of different colors. The white hair tie this young woman wore reminded people that she was Hakuyu. Her name meant white feather. The others were Seki Yu and Koku Yu. Maomao hadn't had much to do with any of them except the youngest. Seki Yu, it has been a while, Hakuyu said. Maomao was usually greeted by Yinghua and her companions. She hadn't seen Haku Yu or her sisters the last time she had been here during rounds. We have been waiting for you. Please come this way. Yinghua spoke with a tone one might use with a stranger. Unlike Yinghua's talkative group, these 3 sisters were quieter. Perhaps they were more mature. Maomao understood the message. She did not need to exchange pleasantries. She could just come in. Maomao was accustomed to Yinghua, Gyuan and Ailan bustling around her when she arrived, but today everything was quiet. Has something happened? She asked. She had been suspicious from the moment she was called here alone. Hakuyu only showed Maomao to the reception room and said, here, you can ask Her Majesty yourself. Then she left. Maomao entered the room and found Jyokayu sitting on a couch. Hongyang was standing beside her. Maomao offered a slow, respectful bow. It has been quite some time, Jyokayu said, nodding at her in return. Yes, ma'am, I regret that it has been so long. In fact, it had only been a month or so since the medical exam, not all that long. Do you have any idea why I summoned you? The Empress asked. Maomao shook her head. Jyokayu sounded more subdued than usual. The mischievous twinkle in her eye was missing. Maomao thought about that look on her face. She remembered it well. It was the same look Jyokayu had worn the very first time Maomao saw her. She had been confronting consort Lihua over the mysterious illness that had threatened both their children. A look of anxiety crossed her face. Beating around the bush will serve no one. It is better to explain things at once. Don't you agree, Hongyang? Jyokayu said, looking at her chief lady in waiting. Hongyang placed something wrapped in cloth on the table. She undid the wrapping, revealing a hair stick worked in silver. It had an intriguing design. A charm resembling a lantern or a basket hung off the end. It was intricately sculpted, the work of a true master. Maomao observed some dark splotches. Silver corroded quickly, and these blotches made the hair appear less lovely than it should have been. The sculpting itself was spectacular. However, when you looked at the whole thing, it seemed somehow lacking. It appeared mismatched or inconsistent. It felt like something was missing, some crucial piece. It wasn't really nice enough for an empress to wear. Maomao gave the hair stick a quizzical look. "What is this, milady?" "This is what I was wearing at the garden party," Jayukayu replied. "You were, ma'am." Maomao furrowed her brow. Jayukayu had been wearing this in public. That seemed unlikely, not least because Hongniang would never have allowed it. "I know what you're thinking," Hongniang interjected. "The empress would never have worn it to the party looking like this. Should have figured."